I put every team's all-time best roster back into the NHL to see who wins the Stanley Cup. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be simming 5 seasons to see which all-time team is the best, who finishes with the most points all-time, and if any team can win multiple Stanley Cups. I'm excited. Let's get into it. But before I do that, 95% of you guys watching are not subscribed right now, so if you guys like hockey, you guys like Shell, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into it. So after simming the first season, in the Eastern, the Toronto Maple Leafs finished in first place, followed by the Red Wings, Capitals, Bruins, and Lightning in the top 5. Top 3 was a pretty close race. The Red Wings only under the Leafs by 1 point, with the Capitals 3 points under the Red Wings. Pretty close race. Hopping into the Western, the Edmonton Oilers were number 1 in the Western, 112 points, 51 wins, 21 losses, with the Blackhawks right under them, 110 points, also very close there as well. Only a 1-game difference, but then if you look down in number 3, it was the Avalanche, which they were 9 points behind the Blackhawks, 48 and 29 record, so obviously not bad at all. Now let's look at the individual stats. Ovechkin finished with the most points in the NHL, 128 points, 79 goals, 49 assists. Then it was Wayne Gretzky, 113 points for him, with Adam Oates at the number 3 slot, 106 points for him, 12 goals and 94 assists. So this guy is an assist merchant. Heading into the playoffs, Avalanche versus the Blues in the first round. St. Louis ended up winning that series 4-2. Next up in the West was the Flames versus the Blackhawks. Calgary ended up winning that series 2-4. Next game was the Sharks versus the Canucks. San Jose swept the Canucks, no problems there. And the last game in the first round is going to be Edmonton versus the Ducks, and Edmonton almost swept the Ducks. First game in the second round was the Blues versus the Flames. St. Louis ended up winning that series 4-3. Second game of round 2 was the Oilers versus the Sharks. The Sharks coming out on top again, 4-2 over the Oilers. I mean, Wayne Gretzky, enjoy Cancun, buddy. And in the Western Conference Final, it was the Sharks versus the Blues, and the Sharks, once again, no problems at all. The Sharks win 4-1 in the series, heading into the Cup Final. Round 1 in the East was the Islanders versus the Rangers. The Rangers ended up winning that 2-4. Next up was the Capitals and Lightning. Capitals win 4-0, sweep the Tampa Bay Lightning. Then it was the Red Wings versus the Bruins. Red Wings almost sweeping the Bruins there 4-1. And the last game in the first round was the Maple Leafs versus the Habs, and the Maple Leafs ended up winning that 4-3. Second round in the East, Capitals versus the Rangers. Rangers stood absolutely no chance. Capitals sweep them in the second round. Next up was the Leafs versus the Red Wings, and the Red Wings, no really problem at all. Red Wings win in 6 games. Heading into the conference was the Red Wings versus the Capitals. Once again, Detroit, no problems, winning in 6 games, meaning it was the Sharks and the Red Wings in the Stanley Cup Final, and the Sharks ended up almost sweeping the Red Wings, winning the Stanley Cup. But with that being said, let's go ahead and see Season 2. Can the Sharks win the Cup again? Let us see. Heading into Season number 2, as you can see in the Eastern, the Detroit Red Wings finished first, 122 points, 59 wins, 19 losses. Absolute crazy season from the Red Wings, holy smokes. Then it was Montreal, Washington, Toronto, Tampa, Sabres, Penguins. Heading into the Western, in first place was the Edmonton Oilers, 82 wins, 114 points, 55 wins, 23 losses. Followed them up is going to be the Blackhawks. Third slot is going to be the Blues. Fourth, Flames. Fifth, Avalanche. Sixth, Jets. Seventh, Sharks. So the Sharks just won the Stanley Cup last season, you know, stacked team. Now they finish in 7th place in the West. Like I said, it's such a hit or miss with having all-time players in there because every team is basically really good. Leading the NHL in points is actually Wayne Gretzky this season, 113 points, 87 goals, and 45 assists. What a season for Wayne. Then it was Ovi with 125 points, 78 goals. Then it was Brett Hull, if I remember correctly. The top 3 is the same in different order as last season. Brett Hull had 110 points. A couple other noticeable names, you know, we got Paul Coffey, 99 points. Gordie Howe, 98. Mario Lemieux, 95 points. Heading into round number 1 on the East, it was the Penguins and the Islanders in game number 1, and the Islanders ended up taking the series by 1 game. That went to 7. Game number 2, Capitals versus Tampa. Tampa 4-0 sweeps them. Game number 3, round 1, was the Habs and Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs ended up winning winning 4-1. And lastly, on the East, round number 1, it was the Red Wings versus the Sabres, and Buffalo ended up beating the Red Wings in the first round. That is shocking. Round number 2, Islanders versus Tampa. The Islanders swept Tampa Bay. Second round, second game in the East, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Sabres, and Buffalo beats the Maple Leafs in the second round. Lastly, in the conference final in the East, it was the Sabres versus the Islanders, a very crazy matchup, and the Islanders ended up beating the Sabres 4-2. Swapping back over to the West, first round, Colorado versus the Blues. Colorado ended up beating them. Next up is the Blackhawks and the Jets. Winnipeg ended up beating the Blackhawks in 7 games. Next up, it was the Flames and the Sharks, and the Sharks ended up winning after not having the best regular season. They're still going to the second round of the playoffs. And the last game in the first round is the Oilers and the Kings, and Edmonton ended up taking that game. Second round in the West, Avalanche versus the Jets. Avalanche ended up beating them in 6. Second game in the second round in the West, it was the Oilers and Sharks, and Edmonton ended up taking it. Going into the Eastern Conference Final, it was the Oilers and the Avs, and Avalanche ended up winning. Avalanche advancing to the Cup Final. So in the Cup Final, it was the Avalanche versus the Islanders, and Colorado ended up winning the Stanley Cup in our second season sim. And with that being said, it's time to hop into Sim 3. Unfortunately, there was no repeat for San Jose, but maybe they can do it again this year, who knows. Sim number 3 is complete. The Maple Leafs ended up taking it. 117 points, 57 wins, 22 assists. It was a close race between the second, third, and fourth position, but the Capitals were second, the Red Wings were third, Canadiens fourth, and then the Islanders were fifth. Heading into the Western, Edmonton once again finishing number 1, 110 points, 51 wins, 23 assists. Then it was the Blues, Blackhawks, Sharks, Avalanche, Flames. Heading into the individual stats for the regular season, Adam Oates, 125 points this season, with Ovechkin just under him with 123. And then it was Wayne Gretzky with 122. So I'm kind of seeing that, you know, the top 3 and also probably the top 10, all of these players have been relatively the same for the last 3 sims. You know, you got Mike Gartner, you got Mike Bossy, you got Peter Forsberg, Brett Hull, Joe Sakic. You know, all these players I'm pretty sure have been in, you know, the top 10 in individual points in the regular season the last, what, 3 sims? Let's go ahead and look at the playoff tree. In the Western, round number 1, it was the Blackhawks versus the Avs. Chicago ended up winning in 6. The Blues and Predators, the Blues ended up winning in 5. The Sharks and the Flames, the Sharks ended up winning in 6. And last but not least, it was the Oilers and Jets, and Edmonton swept the Jets. Round number 2 in the West, it was the Blues and the Blackhawks. Chicago ended up winning in 7. And then it was the Oilers and Sharks, and the Sharks ended up sweeping the Oilers. Wayne Gretzky goes out sad. In the Western Conference Final, it was the Blackhawks and the Sharks lose in 7 games, meaning the Blackhawks are going to the Cup Final. In the Eastern, round number 1, it was the Islanders and the Penguins. The Islanders ended up winning in 5. Capitals versus the Lightning, the Capitals ended up winning in 5. Detroit and the Habs, Detroit ended up winning in 5 as well. And then it was the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Buffalo Sabres, and the Sabres ended up winning in 6. Second round, Capitals and the Islanders, Capitals ended up winning in 5. And then it was the Red Wings and Sabres, and Detroit ended up winning in 6. Eastern Conference Final, it was the Capitals and the Red Wings, and the Capitals ended up winning in 6 games. Meaning it was a Blackhawks and Capitals Stanley Cup Final, and Washington ended up beating the Blackhawks in the final in 6 games. But with that being said, another season simmed. Ovechkin, great season. Let's hop into season number 4 and see what happens here. I assume points are going to be the same. Stanley Cup winner, though, it's been different every year, so we'll see. So we just simmed the 4th season. In first place in the West was the St. Louis Blues. 82 games played, 111 points, 52 wins, 23 losses. Then it was the Calgary Flames in second, 102 points. So it was a pretty big margin in between first and second there. That's like 4 or 5 games right there. And then it was the Avs in third, 98. It was the Sharks in fourth, 95. And the Canucks in fifth, 93 points. Heading into the East, first place was the Red Wings once again, 122 points, 59 wins, 19 losses. The Red Wings are in discussion for the best team of all time for sure. In second was the Montreal Canadiens, 114 points, 54 wins, 22 losses. Then it was the Leafs, 111 points, the Bruins, 104 points, and the Penguins, 101 points. points. Heading into the individual stats in the Western, Brett Hull once again finishing up there in points, 131 points, 77 goals, 54 assists, leading the Western in points. Then it was Wayne Gretzky, 124, Mark Messier, 119. Once again, honestly, same players here in the top 10. You know, we got McKinnon, Sakic, Thornton. All of these players have been there the last 4 sims. Now we are in the playoff tree in the Western. First round was Nashville and Avalanche. The Nashville Predators ended up winning in 7 games. Then it was the Blues and the Kings. St. Louis almost swept the Kings in 5 games. That's crazy. Game number 3 was the Sharks and the Vancouver Canucks. And the Vancouver Canucks ended up almost sweeping the Sharks in 5 games. That's surprising right there. The Sharks are a known team to go far in the playoffs through these sims. Last but not least, round number 1, we got the Flames and the Oilers. Calgary ended up winning in 6 games. Heading into the second round, in the Western Division, St. Louis and the Preds. St. Louis swept the Predators. Next up is the Flames and the Canucks, and Canucks, dude, 4-1 against the Flames, almost sweeping them in 5 games as well. Then it was the Western Conference Final, the Blues and the Canucks ended up winning in 7 games. The Canucks are advancing to the Stanley Cup Final. But before that, let's look at the Eastern. Round number 1, the Rangers and the Islanders. The Islanders almost swept the Rangers in 5 games. Then it was the Penguins and the Bruins. Boston almost sweeping the Penguins in 5 games. Then it was the Habs and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto won in 5 games, almost sweeping the Habs in the first round. And last but not least, in the first round, it was the Red Wings and the Panthers, and the Red Wings ended up sweeping the Panthers 4-0. Second round in the Eastern was the Islanders and the Boston Bruins. Boston ended up winning in 5 games, almost sweeping the Islanders. Second game in round number 2 was the Red Wings and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto almost sweeping the Red Wings. Another shocker right there. And then in the Eastern Conference Final, it was the Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Bruins ended up winning in 7 games. Another shocker there, especially since Toronto just came off of almost sweeping the best team. And then in the Cup Final, the Canucks and the Bruins almost swept the Canucks, dude. What a season for the Boston Bruins. Alrighty, boys, the last season has been simmed. Let's see. The Toronto Maple Leafs ended up finishing first, 125 points, 59 wins, 16 losses. Then it was the Detroit Red Wings, 112 points, 53 wins, 23 losses. In third place was the Canadiens, 106 points. Fourth place was the Caps, 105 points, and the Sabres, 103 points. All very close. I was curious to see the worst teams. 16 was the Florida Panthers, 68 points, 31 wins, 45 losses. Then it was the Rangers, 73 points. The Devils, we don't talk about that, 14th. Yeah, whatever. But let's go ahead and look at the Western. Chicago Blackhawks finishing first, 115 points, 53 wins, 20 losses. Then it was the Avs, a good amount of games behind the Blackhawks, may I add, 51 wins, 27 losses. Then it was the Ducks in third, the Flames in fourth, and the Vancouver Canucks in fifth. If we want to look at the worst teams in the West as well, Seattle Kraken at the bottom. I mean, obviously new team. They don't have any all-time great, legend kind of players on their team, so it kind of makes sense. In the playoffs, it was the Avalanche versus the Predators. First game, round number 1 in the Western, and Colorado ended up winning in 6. Game number 2 was the Blackhawks and the Kings. Chicago ended up sweeping the Kings. Game number 3 is the Flames and the Canucks. Calgary ended up beating the Canucks in 7. And last but not least, it was the Ducks and the Oilers. Anaheim ended up taking that win in 7. Round number 2, Blackhawks and Avalanche. The Avalanche went and turned around and swept the Blackhawks this time after the Blackhawks swept the Kings in the first round. Next round, they got swept as well. Game number 2, the Ducks and the Calgary Flames. Another game the Ducks brought to 7 and ended up taking the win. In the Western Conference, it was the Avalanche and the Ducks, and Anaheim ended up taking the Dubski in 6 games. Headed on over to the East, it was the Islanders and the Penguins in round 1. Pittsburgh ended up winning in 7. Next game was the Capitals and the Sabres, and Buffalo ended up winning in 6. Game number 3, Red Wings and the Habs. Montreal ended up winning in 7 games. The Red Wings eliminated in the first round. Last game in the first round was the Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Bruins ended up beating them in 5 games. Headed into round number 2, it was the Penguins versus the Sabres. Buffalo ended up almost sweeping them in 5 games. Last game in the second round was the Habs and the Boston Bruins, and the Habs swept the Boston Bruins. they're headed to the Eastern Conference Final. Then it was the Habs and the Sabres Eastern Conference Final, and Montreal almost sweeps the Sabres 4-1, ended up winning in 5 games. And in the Stanley Cup Final, it was the Ducks versus the Habs. It was a very not close series. Montreal swept the Ducks in the Stanley Cup Final. Just to show you guys real quick, these are the leaders in playoff points. Teemu Selin finished 33 points. Scott Stevens, little bitch. So what I learned from this is that, you know, the same teams and kind of the same players have been up there every single season we simmed, you know, like the Red Wings, the Ducks. We had Adam Oates up there a lot of the sims and points. We had Ovechkin up there and, you know, the sims with point-wise. So honestly, in terms of the regular season, what I've saw in all these sims is that the same teams were there, you know, relatively in the same spots every sim, but when it came to the playoffs, it was all up in the air. You know, there were definitely some upsets there. The Red Wings lost in the first round a couple times. I'm surprised about that, especially since they finished, you know, very high up in the regular season. Let me know what your guys' favorite team is down in the comments. If you guys are new, make sure you like the video and check out my last video where I put Bedard on the Pittsburgh Penguins to see if him and Crosby could win a cup together.